Stormy and I want to welcome you to day 24 of the Bonhoeffer series. I want to start with a little story from when I was in high school. I was part of a youth group, and one day we went out next to the church, well, really in the lot across the street, to play softball. And as we played, we didn't have quite enough people to play a full competitive game, so we had to have some special rules in order to be able to get some outs and things like that, just to make it competitive. And I thought I understood the rules, and my friend thought he understood the rules. And on this particular day, we had a disagreement. And if you've ever played a casual game of softball, you know that sometimes those disagreements can become all really out of proportion compared to the reality of the situation. It's obviously a softball game that nobody remembers anymore except for me, and I only remember it because of that argument. It just wasn't that important, but we made it too important, and it became a really kind of a violent, and not violent, but it was quite an argument, a knockdown, drag out argument. It didn't get physical, but there was a lot of yelling involved. Well, as Bonhoeffer talks about Christian community, he knows of what he speaks, and he's going to talk about the imperfection in the Christian community in today's Devotional, which is day 24 of the Bonhoeffer series. Bonhoeffer knew what he was talking about with all this. He took community quite seriously. In fact, as the German church followed along the Nazi state and fell in with the Nazi state, Bonhoeffer was part of a group that created the Confessing Church. The Confessing Church eventually became illegal, but they still had to train pastors, and they did that. Bonhoeffer did that with 24 pastors in Germany at one point, at this illegal seminary. But before he did that, he went around to a lot of different churches and a lot of different places all up and down England to try to discover what good practices were in communities. And he went so far even as to examine and correspond with Gandhi in India, because he felt like, and said on more than one occasion, he felt like Gandhi's community was carrying out the Sermon on the Mount in the way that the Sermon on the Mount was intended to be carried out. So he even examined and borrowed ideas from Gandhi. And eventually he got this group together. They lived together along the coast. And as they did that, you would think everything went really well, right? As 24 serious, committed Christians living in community. But on one particular occasion, Bonhoeffer said, you can imagine 24 guys getting together. They created quite a mess. Bonhoeffer got up to go do the dishes from dinner, and he invited the seminarians to help, and nobody jumped up to help. And so Bonhoeffer didn't say a word. He simply went into the kitchen, started doing the dishes, and he locked the door. After the seminarians heard him start to do dishes, they realized their mistake and realized how it looked, and really it was inappropriate to their call as Christians. And so the seminarians, several of them, jumped up to go and help Bonhoeffer do the dishes, and found that the door was locked and they couldn't get in. So they knocked on the door, they asked to be let in, asked to help to do the dishes, but Bonhoeffer would not let them in, and he did all the dishes by himself. And walked out and never said another word about it. And his point was made. Even the group of seminarians living together, studying God's Word daily as they did, and praying daily as they did, it was an imperfect community. And Bonhoeffer knew this, and Bonhoeffer writes about community. He knows very much of what he speaks. He lived it, he studied it, he ran around the world looking at different communities, trying to discover what the best Christian community would look like. And even with all that, this is what Bonhoeffer says in the devotional from day 24. He says, every human idealized image that is brought to the Christian community is a hindrance to genuine community and must be broken up so that genuine community can survive. You get the importance of that. Bonhoeffer is saying there is no such thing as a perfect Christian community. In the end, every Christian community is imperfect. Every church, every small group, every ministry leadership team. We're broken people and we have faults. Bonhoeffer says, if you try to make a Christian community perfect, or if you imagine it to be perfect, you'll be forever disappointed. And instead, he says, it's a hindrance to true community. True community involves loving broken people. I think that's an important point. I've observed over the years that as we get wounded and hurt within the church and within the youth group and within small groups and within ministry leadership teams, one of our tendencies is to withdraw or maybe find someplace else to go or find a different group. That's really not the biblical answer, and it would not have been Bonhoeffer's answer. Rather, we take the command in Ephesians 4 seriously. We should bear with one another in love. That is the call of the Christian life. That when we're hurt, when we're wounded, we're still called to bear with one another in love. That's true community. Bonhoeffer's call to us is a call to true Christian community, one in which sometimes we're hurt, one in which sometimes we hurt others. And yet, true community requires us to bear with one another in love. That's the call. That's true Christian community. It's unfortunate at this time in our church's life, as we sit at homes, as we shelter in place, that we are not experiencing that close-in Christian community. But I hope that when we do get back together, when we're able to gather again in groups, in personal places, that as we're wounded, we'll remember these words, that we're called to bear with one another in love, that those wounds are signs of genuine Christian community. That those wounds are part of bearing with one another as we are fallen and broken people, and that we will truly long for that community and desire to be part of it. As Bonhoeffer often said, what he desired was a community that would live out the Sermon on the Mount with one another. That in the end is our goal. It's to help us, to spur one another. We do this as a group. We live out the Sermon on the Mount as a group. And why is that? Because it's hard to live out, and we need that support. But also as we do that, we model it with one another, and we see what it looks like, and we live it out. That's my hope, that you will embrace the Christian community in all its brokenness, embrace one another as Christians who are broken, and desire to be part of that Christian community.